Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of On the Rocks, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by our good friend Jill Officer, who's in the bubble in Calgary these days, working for the World Curling Federation, doing some TV work. Jill, how are you doing, and what's it like being there now?
Yeah, it's certainly nice to have a bit of a different view, I guess, for a while. We had to come in and quarantine. We had testing before we left, testing when we arrived, and then the quarantine, and then finally got to go on site to the venue, doing commentary with World Curling Television. So just happy to have the opportunity to do some work and be around the game. It's been nice to be in the venue, even though it's different.
Well, we all know that you're an excellent analyst because you've been helping us out here on the Rocks all through the Scotties and Brier. What is your take on what you're seeing so far from these international teams, many of who really didn't get a chance to play much before they got here?
Yeah, I think everybody was in a bit of a different situation, whether some had been on the ice all year, like Scotland, I believe, because they had their national training center. They've been on the ice all year, just very few games compared to normal. And then other teams maybe not having ice at all coming into the bubble. So, I think we're still seeing a lot of really great shots. And I think with Team Canada, what I found yesterday was that they were finding that it was an adjustment period to the ice. Brendan said in an interview with me last night that this is his third event in the bubble, and he said the ice has been different every time.
Well, and the rocks are different here, right? And you can probably attest to that because you use World Curling Federation rocks when you get to these events. So you've played in Scotties and then won it and then gone to the Worlds. Is it a big difference?
It can be, and with the ice also being a little bit different, there's a few variables that Team Canada is dealing with, but it's certainly, they've been here for a while, so they're maybe a little bit used to the bubble, but they could also be very fatigued of the bubble as well. So, there's always a bit of an adjustment period, and typically the ice at a World Championship is a little bit straighter than what we see at our Brier and our Scotties Championships. And so it's just an adjustment period. But I thought Team Canada really had a handle on the ice this morning compared to both of their games yesterday.
Is that about a standard from the World Curling Federation, sort of saying to the ice maker, this is kind of how much curl we want, and maybe it's different from what Curling Canada wants?
There is certainly some guidelines in place, and I don't know the whole history and reasoning behind it, but I do know that those guidelines are there, and that's partly why I think we typically see the ice conditions being a little bit different and a little bit straighter at World championships.
Well, let's address Team Canada. They're off to a 3-0 start, and I think they look fantastic. Except for falling behind to Scotland 5-2 pretty early on in their first game, I thought they've been playing exceptional. Brendan Botcher's curling 89%. The whole team is in mid to high 80s. But when I talked to them today, certainly Brendan was saying we feel like we haven't played our best and we've had to scrap and claw a little bit. And it's a pretty good feeling to be 3-0 despite that. What's your take?
You know what? I have to side with Brendan on this one. I think having watched all three of their games now, I think by far their best game as a whole team was this morning. Yesterday, I felt like there was a bit of struggles in the back end for the game against Scotland, and then a bit of struggles at the front end for the game against Japan last night. So today, I feel like they actually brought it together as a group and had a really good performance this morning against Denmark. They certainly got away with one a little bit in the game against Scotland, having been down a few points to them early. And Bruce Mallett was really making some good shots to put that pressure on Canada and sort of force them to be making some really precise shots. And Canada just sort of found a way to grind back. And then there was that one steal of two that just really sort of turned that game around that Bruce Mallett was playing, and they just hit it the wrong way and left Canada with that steal of two, and that sort of turned the momentum around in that game.
Well, that's got to be a mark of a good team if you're not at your best, and to the extent that you're even talking about, and you're still winning. And these are against, Bruce Mallett is certainly a medal contender. Japan, I think, finished fourth at the last Worlds. These are very good teams, and they're still doing enough to make sure they win.
Well, and that's just it. They're a really good team, and they're like Team Canada is really good and they're really, really smart. And so sometimes you're making the right shots at the right time. It's not always about what we're seeing in the percentages or the consistency necessarily. While that is important and certainly goes a long way to putting those W's on the board, sometimes you just have to make the right shot at the right time to get the points and to get the W at the end of the day.
What do you feel for those guys being out there for the first time in this situation? I know Brendan has worn the Team Canada colors before at the World Juniors, and I think Karak and Brad as well at the World University Games. This is all new for Darren Moulding, but just as someone who's been there, do you think that they're approaching it right and just sort of soaking it all in and appreciating wearing those colors and being in this position?
I think you have to. Any chance to put on that jersey with the maple leaf on the back is a wonderful opportunity, whether there's fans in the building or not. And I think that they know that there's people watching, that people are at home watching, and the media is at home watching. And the media of us that are allowed in the bubble are watching. And I thought a little bit about this prior to the game, their first game yesterday, and watching them in their pregame practice. And from my perspective, still felt that there was a bit of weight with that maple leaf, even though the atmosphere is different and it's just a different situation because of COVID. I think that maple leaf still has a little bit of weight on it, and I think they're proud to wear it and to take that weight, and that they'll move forward as it is. I mean, it's still an opportunity to play in the World Championship.
Yeah. And Brendan did say that first off yesterday. This is friggin' cool. That's exactly what he said. And the weight that you talk about, I mean, they're going to finish in the top 6 here. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, they are, but you're coming in, you have to do that, right? It's very important for your country, not necessarily for your team, right? So, I mean, there is just those things that, and Darren has said it, he takes the responsibility very seriously.
This is a little bit different situation than we normally see Team Canada in. We're usually in a position that maybe it's not top 6. I think it's usually a 2-year total versus a 1-year total. But because we didn't have the World Championships last year, the Olympic qualifications and the nations that we're going to see at the Olympics next year comes down solely to this event. And we'll see that again at the women's coming up in a few weeks. And it's a little bit different. I think the only other time we maybe saw something like this was when Reed Crothers and Joanne Courtney actually competed at the mixed doubles World Championship and had to finish in a certain placing to qualify Canada for the Olympics. And of course, Canada went on to win the Olympics. So that's the only other time we've really seen Canada in this position. But this is more of a normal position for many of these other nations that are battling every year through the Pacific Asia Championships or the European Championships, trying to get to the World Championships so that they can qualify for the Olympics.
Yeah.
So while it's a little bit different for us, it's not different for a lot of nations that are here. And so I don't know, maybe it's a good thing to have that perspective for a change. And I mean, I think we're going to see, I agree with you. I think we're going to see Team Canada in the top 6, and I don't think we'll have to worry too much about it, but I think it's still important that they need to be aware of it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an interesting point regarding the mixed doubles, because Brad Gushu and Carrie Anderson are going to have to go to the mixed doubles worlds and do the same thing, right? To make sure that Canada qualifies, just as Reed and Joanne did, and gave a big assist to Canada winning the gold medal. But it's not as easy, not as much of a slam dunk in mixed doubles as it is in 4-player curling. And it came up that Darren Moulding got hurt in the mixed doubles. They had to pull out. What happens with that? Like, there's no alternates. It's a very kind of a slippery slope, isn't it?
Yeah, the mixed doubles, I think, is a whole nother story because you're dealing with a completely different format. You're dealing with a significant number of teams. I almost think that with mixed doubles, it's a little bit less predictable about who's going to win a game or who might power through a championship. Like, one end could just change a game and suddenly you're out of the event. So there's a little bit more uncertainty, I think, with the mixed doubles. So it'll be interesting to see where Canada ends up there. I think when it comes to the women's worlds, I think we're probably in a really good position with Carrie Anderson's team also having to finish in the top 6. But yeah, it'll be interesting to watch because Canada is not typically in this position.
Absolutely. Well, Jill, thank you so much for joining me once again from the bubble in Calgary. I hope we will be able to do this again this week during the World Men's Curling Championship. All the best with your work there, and we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Ted.
All right. For Postmedia, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching On the Rocks.